Believe it or not, I actually started here by delivering a pizza.
Oh, yeah?
And I asked to volunteer my time, which became an internship I did for about 9 months.
Wow.
And this is my career. I love it.
Wow. Beautiful.
Before we continue, make sure to hit that like button.
In this video, we were breaking down a chilling disappearance from 2011 that shook an entire community and still leaves unanswered questions hanging in the air. Caitlin Markham was living in Fairfield, Indiana, just 21 years old, with her whole future lined up in front of her. People around town described her as a little different, a little quirky, but always kind, thoughtful, and deeply creative. She had that artistic soul that stood out the moment you met her. Art wasn't just a hobby for Caitlin, it was who she was. Ever since she was a kid, she was drawn to creating things. Always sketching, painting, or building something with her hands. Friends joked you could spot her anywhere with a paintbrush stuck in her hair, completely lost in whatever she was working on. That passion followed her into adulthood and shaped every move she made. By 2011, Caitlin was studying graphic art at the Art Institute of Ohio in Cincinnati and juggling a part-time job at a nearby bridal shop. She was busy, motivated, and clearly grinding towards something bigger. On top of that, she had been in a long-term relationship with John Carter for about 6 years. Engaged for one, and the two were actively planning their next chapter together. The plan was to move to Colorado, start fresh, and finally build a life under the same roof. John was also known as an artist, someone who worked with his hands and even taught people how to blow glass.
You can see Fairfield Police and Fire have their mobile command center out here. About 100 people have gathered off Patterson Boulevard. They all received several of these with Caitlin Markham's picture and information. They've searched the woods, the streets.
From the outside, everything looks solid, creative, and full of promise. No drama, no red flags, just two artistic people moving toward marriage and a shared future. Before we continue, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life crime documentaries, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update like this. These cases matter, and the more eyes on them, the harder they are to forget. Let me know in the comments which country you're watching from. It's honestly wild to see how far these stories travel and how many people around the world still care about truth, justice, and the lives behind these headlines. Your support helps keep these cases alive, spreads awareness, and reminds everyone that unanswered questions don't just disappear with time. So thank you for being here, for caring, and for standing for the truth. Now let's get back to Caitlin's story, because this is where things start to feel off. August 2011 should have been one of the happiest periods of Caitlin's life.
To just go unseen without telling anybody is extremely out of the ordinary. I just really would like to communicate that this is not part of who Caitlin is.
Friends say Caitlin is a responsible young woman, a student at the Art Institute of Cincinnati, also an employee there. Caitlin was last seen by her fiancé, John Carter, Saturday night. He says he left her townhouse around 11:30. About an hour later, he received a text from her.
Caitlin sent me a picture of her, and that was the last message I got.
When Caitlin never showed up for her other job at David's Bridal, people began to worry.
I kept texting her, no response, no response. I call her, no response. I have nothing in mind. She would never just leave. She's too pragmatic. She would never just take off and go somewhere. I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I just want to find Caitlin and celebrate her birthday with her and go to Red Lobster like she was planning. That's all I want to do.
Police say there's no evidence of foul play. Reporting live tonight in Fairfield, Karen Johnson, News 5.
Gosh, her fiancé sounds so desperate, Karen. Anything missing from Caitlin's home?
Nope, just her and her cell phone, which police have not been able to trace. But one other thing I wanted to mention, they believe she was last seen wearing a gray shirt, so that's something people out here are also looking for.
She was days away from turning 22, only weeks from graduating, and wedding plans were moving forward fast. Everything was lining up at once. School, love, freedom, and a whole new state waiting for her. That's why it immediately raised alarms when Caitlin suddenly stopped answering calls and texts. Her phone went straight to voicemail, which wasn't like her at all. After a full day of silence, John went to her townhouse to check on her.
I keep believing that if she is somewhere in the worst case scenario, that she fights her way out. I keep wanting to believe that because she's strong. I know she's strong.
She should have been at work at the bridal shop, but instead, her car was parked outside, untouched. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no shattered windows. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. Her cell phone appeared to be missing, and even more disturbing, her dog was wandering around alone. That detail alone sent chills through everyone involved. At around 8 p.m. on August 14th, John finally called 911. He told police the last time he saw Caitlin was around midnight the night before. When he left her place and walked back to his mom's house just 5 minutes away, he said they exchanged a few texts afterward, but she stopped responding completely.
Fairfield police didn't take much when they searched Caitlin's fiance's house. Tonight, he says he gave consent. He's doing whatever he can to help, even though he feels as if the entire community is pointing fingers and placing blame on him.
I really did not want this to get this far. I really wish that she would have been home by now. You know, I wish this could have been just a party for her being home instead of what it is, you know. People are going to say what they're going to say. You can't stop them.
23-year-old John Carter may not be able to stop the comments, but he can certainly make sure that people know how he feels.
I'm not going to acknowledge the ridiculous things that people are saying because I know, I mean, nobody's going to know about me. They don't know me. And I know me. I know that I would never hurt Caitlin ever in a million years.
Fairfield police have little evidence and no suspects.
That's pretty much it. There's nothing. And it's horrific.
Carter felt the animosity towards him when he was confronted while passing out flyers.
I guess he didn't know who I was, and he was just like, I heard the boyfriend did it. And I was just like, I'm the boyfriend. I would never do anything to hurt her.
And while the days without Caitlin continue, he finds comfort in her cat Ramsey and her artwork.
Even his good morning text the next day went unanswered. When officers arrived, something immediately stood out. John had visible scratches on his neck. At first he brushed it off, saying it came from his electric razor. Then, moments later, he seemed unsure and couldn't fully explain it. That small detail would linger, raising quiet questions from the very start. But John kept insisting nothing bad had happened. He told police he was exhausted, barely sleeping, and completely shaken by not knowing where his fiancée was. According to him, the silence was eating him alive, and all he wanted was for Caitlin to come home safe and unharmed. Repeated that over and over, making it clear he wanted her back, not answers that pointed anywhere dark. Caitlin's father, Dave, and her younger sister, Allie, were extremely close to her, and neither of them believed she would ever just disappear on her own. Dave described her as upbeat, friendly, and driven, someone who made decisions carefully and followed through on them.
Had our kiss, we wouldn't have had our marriage. We wouldn't have them. We wouldn't have our kid. And we wouldn't have our life. And we would grow old together.
Carter's cousin says she considers herself lucky to have called Caitlin family.
Whenever I think of her, I just think of this smile and this artwork, and she was just a colorful human being. She meant well to everybody. Everybody was a friend.
Once Caitlin set her mind on something, she committed fully. Walking away from her life without a word didn't match who she was at all. Because of that, the family strongly believed she didn't just leave. Detectives spent a long time digging into John's background, his movements, and his statements. After looking into him extensively, investigators announced that he was no longer considered a person of interest and that they were shifting focus elsewhere. That decision raised eyebrows for some, but officially, police said they were moving on. At that point, Caitlin's phone became one of the biggest missing pieces. Investigators pulled records from her phone provider starting at 11:04 p.m. That night, she was actively texting John up until 11:36 p.m. After that, the trail went completely silent, just like John had told police, by 12:06 a.m. Her phone either died, lost service, or had the SIM card removed entirely. After that moment, nothing else ever came through. That's where the case began to cool down fast. Officers then followed another lead and spoke with the manager at the GE Credit Union in Fairfield. The manager recalled an interaction from 3 weeks before Caitlin vanished.
I do know there's a warrant for you, but I'm not sure exactly what it's for. So they'll be able to explain all that stuff to you when we get there.
On July 20th, 2011, Caitlin had come in with John's mom to ask about getting a credit card. According to the manager, Caitlin explained she wanted to open a card and that John's mom was willing to help her qualify. John's mom reportedly joked, "I'll co-sign for the visa, but you have to take my son to Colorado with you." The manager laughed and added, "I guess you're stuck now." But something about Caitlin's reaction stood out. She didn't laugh back. She appeared serious, quiet, and even a little sad.
The court imposes the following sentence. Based upon the serious nature of this offense and the factors that have previously been indicated, that anything short of the maximum sentence would demean the seriousness of the offender's conduct and its impact upon the victim, and therefore will impose a definite term of incarceration of 36 months.
The manager later said it felt like Caitlin hadn't fully thought the credit card through, or maybe something about the moment hit deeper than anyone realized. In the end, the card was never set up, and that lead went nowhere. Another witness told police they had been with Caitlin and John on the night of August 13th. They said they smoked weed, talked casually, and discussed Caitlin and John's plans to move to Colorado in the coming months. During the visit, Caitlin stayed on the couch working on school assignments on her laptop and barely moved. The witness said she seemed distant, quiet, and not quite like herself. Around 10:45 p.m., he left the townhouse, leaving Caitlin and John alone. That was the last time he ever saw her. He didn't recall seeing scratches on John's neck at the time, though he admitted he might not have been paying close attention.
That is why there's no closure. I still do not know the whole story. And not that I would have believed him because he's lied for 13 years, but he's offered no explanation, hasn't even tried. And to me, that just shows his character.
Do you think you'll ever get an explanation?
No, I don't. And even if he writes a confession in prison, he's going to have to be more convincing than he's been the past 13 years.
Even though polygraph tests can't be used in court, the fact that the witness offered to take one added weight to his statement. Then came one of the strangest details. A couple of teenagers who had snuck out late between August 13th and August 14th told police they saw two cars driving away from Caitlin S. area with their headlights turned off. No one else reported seeing that, and there was nothing concrete to tie it directly to her disappearance. With no phone, no confirmed sightings, and no solid physical evidence, police were left with very little to work with. In Caitlin's case, slowly drifted into uncertainty, unanswered questions, and uneasy silence. Before long, Caitlin's disappearance was everywhere. Local news, national coverage, non-stop headlines. The entire town of Fairfield was stunned and struggling to understand how something like this could even happen there. Fairfield had just over 40,000 residents, and violent crime was rare at any hour of the day or night. This wasn't the kind of place where people just vanished without a trace. The community mobilized fast. There were candlelight vigils, rallies, flyers taped to windows, TV ads running constantly, and volunteers flooding the streets to help search. A massive effort was launched, with tips pouring in and leads being chased down daily. A national mounted search group from Texas even stepped in, conducting dozens of searches across nearby counties, parks, fields, and waterways.
Ouch.
They combed through wooded areas, old train tracks, remote paths, and places most people would never think to look. Caitlin's family was everywhere, pleading for answers with everything they had. They spoke to cameras, reporters, strangers, anyone who would listen. Gosh, Caitlin and her fiancé, John, were constantly in the news together, front and center in interviews and appeals for information. While many people focused on finding Caitlin, others quietly continued to side-eye John, even though he maintained he had nothing to do with her disappearance. Soon after, Caitlin's 22nd birthday came and went. There wasn't even time to fully process how painful that milestone was because the search never slowed down. Everyone was still pushing forward, desperate for progress. At the same time, Fairfield police continued saying there was no clear sign of foul play, a statement that deeply frustrated and angered Caitlin's family. To them, something was obviously wrong, and the lack of urgency felt unbearable. John spoke publicly about his relationship with Caitlin in glowing terms. He described their bond as strong and loving and said he missed her terribly. But behind the scenes, Caitlin's close friend shared a very different picture. According to her, things had not been okay for a long time. For nearly 6 months before she vanished, Caitlin had confided that she was unhappy, stressed, and felt trapped in the relationship. She reportedly told her friend she was exhausted by John's drug use and his constant consumption of pornography. She said she no longer felt emotionally or physically connected to him and had no interest in intimacy anymore because things had become overwhelming and uncomfortable. She also didn't like some of the sexual activities he asked for and felt pressured in ways that made her shut down completely. According to the friend, John could become angry and possessive, especially when Caitlin talked to other men, even casually. Over time, it became clear to those close to her that Caitlin felt done with the relationship and wanted out, was trying to move forward but felt boxed in, emotionally and practically. She also expressed discomfort with how involved John's mother was in their lives. Caitlin believed things like the credit card situation were attempts to keep them tied together when she was already pulling away. Even though she wasn't happy, the pressure from all sides may have made her feel stuck, like escaping was the only option left. Her family strongly rejected that idea. They insisted Caitlin would never leave without asking for help or telling someone first. She was organized, responsible, and open with the people she trusted. After she went missing, her loved ones spoke up immediately, sharing everything they knew because they believed answers were close. One detail that stood out to her friend was that John had referred to Caitlin in the past tense several times during interviews. That felt off and unsettling, raising quiet concerns among those listening closely. For a short time, attention shifted to another possible suspect. In June 2012, a 26-year-old man named Greg Pratt, who had lived next door to Caitlin, was arrested for assaulting a student at Miami University. Investigators briefly considered whether he could be connected to Caitlin's disappearance. But after reviewing his movements and whereabouts that night, Fairfield police officially ruled him out. Once again, the case stalled. Nearly 2 years had passed since Caitlin was last seen, yet her name was still everywhere. The reward for information continued to rise, and publicly. John Carter and Caitlin's family appeared united, pushing for answers together. Then, on April 7, 2013, everything changed. Investigators discovered human bones wrapped in black plastic construction sheeting in a remote wooded area in Indiana. Dental records later confirmed the remains belonged to Caitlin Markham. She had been found nearly 30 miles from her home, ending the search but opening a new chapter filled with even heavier questions. When investigators finally examined the remains, the details were disturbing and difficult to process. Caitlin's skull was found, separated from the rest of her body, sealed inside a plastic bag that had been tightly tied shut. What stood out immediately was the lack of fluids or staining inside the bag, something that raised serious questions right away. According to the medical examiner, this suggested that her head had not decomposed inside the bag. Instead, it appeared the skull was placed there after most of the soft tissue had already broken down somewhere else. That detail alone pointed to movement, handling, and intentional steps taken after her death, making the situation even more chilling. The rest of the bones weren't buried at all. They'd been dumped in a remote area with trash scattered on top of them, almost like someone was trying to make them disappear among discarded debris. On Caitlin's left wrist, examiners found a sharp force injury. It was described as a V-shaped cut that removed a layer of bone, suggesting she had been struck with something sharp and with force. Beyond that injury, there was little else investigators could use to reconstruct exactly what happened. Time and exposure had erased most answers. Still, one thing was clear and officially confirmed. Caitlin had been killed. Her phone was never recovered, and there was no sign of it anywhere near the remains. Soon after, Caitlin's funeral took place, and it looked nothing like a typical service. No one wore dark clothing. Instead, the space was filled with her artwork, lining the walls as a reflection of who she truly was. Many people spoke, sharing memories, love, and grief. John also spoke publicly during the service. Her father Dave later said the funeral brought some comfort, but his heart was heavy for Caitlin's younger sister, Allie. Allie had been just 15 years old when Caitlin disappeared, and she lost someone who meant everything to her. Dave said Caitlin's absence consumed their lives, but for Allie, it meant losing a guiding presence at such a young age, something that never really heals. The location where Caitlin's remains were found only added more complications. Investigators believe she was not killed where her body was discovered because it was in a different jurisdiction. That meant 2 separate police departments had to coordinate, slowing everything down even more. As 2015 arrived, the case felt painfully familiar. Quiet, slow, minimal movement. The reward for information had climbed to $75,000, but tips dried up. Caitlin's case was losing momentum, and that reality was devastating for her family. Refusing to let his daughter be forgotten, Dave pushed for action. He successfully got the Butler County Sheriff's Office to take over the investigation from the Fairfield Police Department. He believed fresh eyes were needed and feared that without pressure, Caitlin's murder would fade into silence. Here Dave also brought in private investigator J. Ryan Green. Green worked his way deep into Caitlin and John's inner circle, speaking with more than a dozen people, though notably not John himself. 5 individuals agreed to take polygraph tests. According to Green, one subject failed in what the examiner described as epic proportions, immediately narrowing the focus and creating new leads. Public attention continued as well. A documentary titled Taken Too Soon, the Caitlin Markham story was screened at a theater in Springdale, reigniting interest and outrage. Near the end of 2016, police quietly acknowledged they had a person of interest, though they said they lacked enough evidence to arrest or publicly name them. Years passed, but by 2023, more than a decade after Caitlin vanished, momentum finally returned. Law enforcement made their first arrest connected to the case. Another individual, Jonathan Paulman, was charged with lying during the investigation. According to investigators and private investigator Green, this marked a major shift. Green stated they now had enough momentum and evidence to convince a judge to sign off on search warrants. He also revealed that Caitlin, John, and Jonathan all knew each other well and were part of the same circle. Jonathan lived nearby and was described as John's best friend. In fact, he was the very first person John called the morning Caitlin was reported missing. After Paulman's arrest, search warrants were executed at 2 locations. One was the home where Paulman lived in 2011, and the other was the house where John Carter lived with his mother at the time, signaling that the case had finally entered a critical new phase. Jonathan Paulman and John Carter were also closely connected to another man named Michael Strauss, a name this channel has covered before. Strauss had previously admitted to following Ellie White and killing her, later receiving a sentence of 17 years to life. At one point, police took a serious look at him in connection to Caitlin's case, after he made disturbing statements suggesting Ellie wasn't the first person he had killed. Despite the chilling overlap, investigators eventually ruled Michael Strauss out. Even with the eerie similarities between the 2 cases, police kept circling back to the same name over and over again: John Carter. As time passed, that focus only intensified. John had mostly disappeared from the public eye after Caitlin's remains were found. By then, investigators had quietly built up a growing collection of circumstantial evidence against him over the years. Now 36 years old, married, and a father, John's life had moved forward on the surface, but questions from the past never stopped following him. Investigators noticed that John's explanations never fully lined up. His stories shifted, details didn't match, and nothing seemed consistent. Caitlin's father, Dave, became more doubtful as time went on. One detail that continued to stand out came from the teens who reported seeing 2 cars leaving Caitlin's area that night. Investigators later determined that one vehicle was John's, while the other remained unidentified on the night of August 13, 2011. Even more troubling, both John's phone and Caitlin's phone went silent around the same time. Investigators also uncovered numerous text messages exchanged between them after 8 p.m. and around 8:36 p.m. that John had deleted from his device. John claimed he sent certain messages, including a good morning text, but records showed those messages were never actually sent. John voluntarily agreed to take 3 polygraph tests, one in September 2011, another in February 2014, and a third in January 2021. All 3 reportedly showed deception. Experts stated that during the final test, John appeared to lie when directly asked whether he had disposed of Caitlin's body on Big Cedar Road. Searches were also conducted at his mother's home. Investigators seized more than a dozen items, including handwritten notes related to the investigation, Caitlin's schoolwork stored in a folder on SD card, and disturbing writings centered on death and violence. Among those materials was what investigators believed to be the same type of construction plastic used to wrap Caitlin's remains, found not far from the Carter family farm. One handwritten note in particular raised alarms. It contained John's name and included deeply troubling statements written as if in an internal argument. The note read, "Deep down, I love her. You ought to kill her, but I love her. She must die. I can't kill her." Yes, you can. No. Yes. How do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good, but you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right about nothing. Investigators viewed it as disturbing insight into his mental state. More people eventually came forward describing John as unstable, angry, and controlling during his relationship with Caitlin. There was also video footage showing him yelling at his current wife while holding their child, a moment that alarmed investigators and reinforced concerns about his behavior. When detectives confronted John with the mounting evidence, he showed little reaction. He dismissed it all as speculation and claimed investigators were twisting language and making assumptions. Despite the growing case against him, John continued denying all involvement and repeated that he had always wanted Caitlin to return home safely. For years, investigators pushed forward, fully aware that much of the case relied on circumstantial evidence rather than DNA or direct physical proof. Still, they believed the pattern was strong enough to present to the district attorney. In March 2023, police finally made their move. John Carter was arrested at his workplace and charged with 2 counts of murder. One count alleged he attempted to kill Caitlin on or around August 13th or 14th, 2011. The second alleged he killed her while committing or attempting to commit a violent felony. John was granted $1 million Australian bond and ordered to wear a GPS monitor as a condition of release. Jonathan Paulman was also released pending trial after his arraignment. Despite everything presented, John Carter formally entered a plea of not guilty, setting the stage for a case that would finally face the courtroom after more than a decade of unanswered questions. John Carter's trial was officially set for June 2024, a moment that felt unreal after more than a decade of waiting. Jonathan Paulman was also scheduled to face court on a perjury charge, but that charge was later dropped, adding even more frustration and confusion to an already exhausting case. By June, prosecutors had called in more than 50 witnesses, reopening wounds that never truly healed. It had been over 10 years since Caitlin disappeared and was later found, and for her family, time never softened the pain. Then, after denying everything for more than a decade, John suddenly changed his plea. That moment hit Caitlin's father, Dave, like a shock to the body. He said it felt like he wasn't even inside himself, like reality had shifted in an instant. For years, Dave had carried a gut feeling about John, one that never left him alone. He admitted it made him angry knowing John had walked around for 12 years believing he was untouchable, above the law while everyone else lived with the truth burning inside them. Dave also reflected on Caitlin's funeral, remembering how John stood beside him, hugged him, cried with him, and even helped with searches. All while, according to Dave, everyone there already knew something was wrong. When someone later asked John if he could at least explain what really happened, his response was cold and final. He said, "I cannot." At one point, a fellow inmate reportedly told police that John had described how he killed Caitlin while in custody. But John never repeated that account in court, and detectives were never able to officially obtain a confession from him. Still, nothing prepared anyone for what came next. The sentence stunned everyone. John Carter received the maximum sentence allowed under the charge, 3 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter, a third-degree felony. After that, he would serve 3 additional years under house arrest. Even though it was the harshest sentence legally possible, it felt painfully small compared to the loss of a life. One detective who worked closely on the case made a chilling statement afterward. He said, "I've interviewed 1,000 people, from murder to trespassing, and I've never interviewed a psychopath. That's what I said when John left. That was the first psychopath I've ever interviewed." Those words lingered heavily over the outcome. Investigators and prosecutors also believed John didn't act alone. They suspected someone else helped dispose of Caitlin's body and possibly assisted after her death. Caitlin's family later identified who they believed that person was, but they still don't know the full truth, and likely never will. Soon, John will be free again, able to live his life, while Caitlin never got the chance to finish hers. The judge's hands were tied by the law, even while delivering the maximum punishment available. It's a reality that feels cruel and deeply unfair, leaving many believing Caitlin never truly received justice. 14 years after Caitlin was last seen, a butterfly memorial was held at a park near her home. Trees were planted and everyone wore butterfly-themed clothing, filling the space with color and art just like Caitlin loved. Dave said moments like that remind him he isn't alone, even though living with such loss and unanswered questions feels impossible. He said he thinks about Caitlin every single day, carrying her memory forward, even when the truth remains just out of reach. It's not fair that Caitlin, her sister, her friends, her family, and an entire community that loved her have had to wait years just to see even a piece of accountability. Every single day, that weight leaves scars that don't fade. I think often about where Caitlin would be right now, what kind of work she'd be creating, what kind of artist she'd be growing into. She had real talent, real vision, and a future that mattered. Would have been a powerful woman in her field, no doubt about it. Sometimes when I see a beautiful piece of art, I catch myself thinking that should have been Caitlin's on that wall. That thought never gets easier. Thank you truly for being here today and spending your time with this story. It means more than words can explain that you chose to listen, to learn, and to sit with this case. Whether you watch quietly or speak up in the comments, your presence helps keep these stories alive and prevents them from being forgotten. Every view, every like, and every bit of support helps this community grow into something stronger and more meaningful. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you feel moved to share your thoughts, your feelings, or even just your respect, the comments are always open. I read as many comments as I can, and every voice matters here. Your ideas, your reactions, and your support shape where this channel goes next. As we close out today's video, I just want to say thank you again for riding with this community and standing for truth. Take care of yourself, stay grounded, and give yourself space to breathe. Life moves fast, and slowing down matters more than we admit. I hope the rest of your day or night brings you peace, comfort, and at least one small reason to smile. Till next time, stay safe, stay kind, and remember Caitlin's name.